Let me ask you something. Are you still chasing a dream that you outgrew, but you can't seem to let it go off? That hit, right? And that is what this chapter takes a dive into. Cause we rarely admit to ourselves of how much of our goals and values and the definition of success changes over time. It is not always about money. It is about who you are becoming and how dangerous it is to lock your present decisions that were made by your past version of yourself. Today, I will be talking about the chapter number 14 from the book called The Psychology of Money. The chapter title is You Will Change, and it is one of the most important and emotional chapter from this book. Cause this book does not just talk about growing financially. It also teaches me how to grow emotionally and spiritually. Cause it is very dangerous to lock your future to your past version of yourself. My key takeaways that I took from this chapter are, firstly, people tend to underestimate on how much their goals, desires, and values will change over time. Secondly, to avoid becoming a prisoner to your past ambitions, stay flexible. Thirdly, regret often comes from refusing to adapt when everything is evolving. Number 4, it is okay to outgrow your old dreams. Evolve without guilt. And lastly, you can't predict who you will be in the next 10 years. So, build a life that has a room to pivot. With that, let's jump into my key lessons that I took away from this chapter. The lesson number 1, which I took away from this chapter, is you aren't who you were, and that is very normal. Mr. Morgan opens this chapter up with a very powerful line. He says, the most important part of every plan is planning your plan not going according to your plan. That is very hard to read and it is very hard to comprehend. But this line has helped me to open a new door for myself. And I believe this knowledge you will not get it until you have gone through it. And if this line applies to you, then understand this, that you will change. What you want at the age of 20 is not gonna be the same as to what you will want at the age of 40. Cause with time, your definition of success and failure tend to change. And that is not a weakness, it is growth. With that, it brings me to the key lesson number 2, which I took away from this chapter, which is the problem. Mr. Morgan says, the illusion of permanent desire can lead to regret, and let that sit in. Because many of us end up making a long-term commitment based on our short-term selves. We chase careers, the cars, the lifestyle, the houses. But Mr. Morgan calls this end of history illusion. Cause the belief while we have changed a lot from our past, but we won't change much in the future. That's not true. You will change. So ask yourself this question. Why should you trap yourself in a decision that leaves you with no room of who you are becoming? And with that, it brings me to the next key lesson from this chapter, which is the change of mind. And that is okay. This line from this chapter teaches me the power of acceptance. Mr. Morgan says it is fine to have big financial goals, but you should also be prepared for the possibility that you will wake up one day and no longer want what you wanted. And this has happened with me. The desire of wanting more was taught to me in my upbringing by the world. But the power of needing less was taught to me by this chapter from this book. And the power of enough was taught to me by this book. It is okay selling a house, quitting your job, starting all over again, downsizing, and saying no to your old dreams. Do all of it if you have to. And that is absolutely okay until your plan is to keep going. Because that, my friend, is called realignment and not quitting. And sometimes letting go of a dream is one of the most powerful thing you can do. And with that, it brings me to the next key lesson from this chapter, which is adaptability, commitment to your old version of you. The people who are struggling, the people who thrive, they are usually the ones who are rigid with a 10-year-old plan. They are the ones who check in constantly. And Mr. Morgan says, be careful when spending a lifetime choosing a goal that no longer fits in who you are. Your life is not a contract. Neither are you a machine. You are lucky. You are a human. Human that has feelings. So keep updating your dreams. Cause real wealth is not having lots of money. It is that you have the freedom to evolve. And with that, it brings me to the last key lesson from this chapter, which is flexibility in your life. Mr. Morgan ends this chapter with a thought that lingers. He says, long-term planning is harder than it seems because people, goals, and desire change over time. Think it through. As the world we live in, nothing stays the same as it used to. Because I grew up playing games where it required people to gather at one place to play the game. But now my little brother is growing up in PlayStations and video games. And this chapter has reminded me my beautiful memories of my childhood and how big the things have changed over the past 20 years. And trust me, I have to adapt a lot. A few ideas that I have picked up from this chapter are, firstly, expect your mind and your values to shift. Plan with that harsh truth. Secondly, give yourself permission to pivot emotionally, financially, and professionally. And lastly, don't let who you were limit who you are becoming. Try to adapt and bring flexibility in your life as well as in your plans. This chapter hits me on so many levels, and most of all, it reminded me of my roots, to where I came from. And with that, it brings me to the end of this video. And if you have ever felt guilty for changing your mind or just afraid of evolving, then remember this. It is not failure, but it is freedom that you can change.